I
Yeah.
loved this book so much. I read it basically in a night, stayed up
Yes.
so late finishing it. I couldn't put it down. It's so moving. It's also, as Ron and I were saying before, it's so funny. Your observations in this
good.
we were talking about the line of at your age, milk is basically poison. I died.
Wait, about the what? I'm sorry.
At your age, milk is basically poison.
Oh,
or
right,
something
right,
with one
right,
of
right.
the
Yes.
so good.
Yes.
And then also the way you nailed this, I couldn't get over. I read it like 10 times because I was like, no one has ever hit it like this. When you talked about all those guys standing up and doing lines from American Buffalo and calling that, I truly wanted to jump out of my skin and my chair because I was like, no one has ever put it that way.
Well,
talking about theater.
Credit
men.
where credit is due. You know who told me that story? Adam O'Byrne.
Is that true?
The producer of this podcast.
That's correct. I wined and dined Adam O'Byrne and asked him to talk to me about being in the theater. And he didn't put it exactly that way, but he just talked about how if you get a group of people together who have been in like a Mammoth play, they'll start firing off lines to each other.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was a funny thing to put in
You
there.
nailed it.
Oh, this book, I texted Cynthia when I was in the middle of reading this book, and I said, I feel like this book has been written just distinctly for me to enjoy.
I felt the same way. I felt the same way. I feel like
it was such
I did. I wrote it for both of you.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
noticed Bryan wasn't in the acknowledgments, and I did want to bring that up, Cynthia, but I didn't know if it went to press before you started in the Carriage House.
No,
book
it's
club
it's
or
okay.
not.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure like the next book will be called Bryan or something like that.
Yeah.
It's going to be dedicated to you.
Okay, good.
So I
Okay,
didn't
good.
want to, undercut.
Yeah.
I understand.
You don't want to be
Cynthia. I
acknowledged when you could be dedicated to.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
did. I did see some names in there that I recognized though, and I was like, "How the hell did they get in this thing?"
Well,
so
there was
mad.
half the Carriage House was in this book in the book.
No
club here, but
kidding.
I
was
this
so
book
upset about it.
was, to use a Carriage House phrase, absolutely scrumptious. It was
I
a
like that.
scrumptious read. And it was,
scrumptious read.
I understood. Somebody wrote, we have a couple of questions and comments, but somebody wrote to us, and I've already repeated this a couple of times, but I don't mind. I'm going to repeat it again. Erin Bagwell, who's a longtime listener of the Carriage, she's in both, she's a CHIP and she's on the free feed.
Mhm.
Is she related to Oliver Cromwell?
I'm certain of it.
Okay.
She said, I just got Good Company and it's so good. I'm struggling not to consume it in one sitting and really trying to savor it by reading a little each day. And I don't know how she could have possibly achieved that because it just, you wanted to devour every piece of it, but you knew it was that sort of thing where you thought, if I eat all of this, it'll be gone. And so you had to try and pace yourself. And it was so well observed. And I don't know how you pulled this off, but the book is not, it's funny, it's sharp, it's well observed, but it's not judgmental. And I don't know how you pulled that off.
It's not sarcastic. It's not, you're not shitty with these observations. It literally just feels like you're making very specific observations.
I think cynicism in a book is my least favorite quality.
Yeah.
I don't want to read a book where the author seems to have contempt for the people they're writing about. And so, I mean, sometimes that works. Sometimes it's like in heavy satire or like in a truly comic raucous novel, know, but I think that when you don't love your characters, they don't feel real. They just feel like types. So
and particularly
I have to genuinely love them.
Yeah, and particularly the men, because it would have been easy to just decide. Because to me, maybe I'd be curious how Bryan felt, but there's a very strong female current that runs through this book.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The primary relationships between the two best friends, and then everyone is triangulated around the daughter. So there's this sort of necessary female current. And sometimes what can happen is that becomes a little cliquey and a little coven-y, and that men find themselves on the outside of that arrangement. But I loved that there were shifting alliances within this core group that everybody had a connection in some way to another. Honestly, I'm getting choked up thinking about it. The book brought me to tears a couple of times.
Me too. There were a few times I got really, really misty-eyed.
Yeah, and I was surprised by there were moments where I thought,
Me too.
What's that making me
how
cry
about when
for?
she
But it just
describes
is.
the perfect, when they go to dinner for the first time, the four of them,
Mhm.
and that I'm getting chills, that perfect night in New York, it just truly, and then the way you describe the magic of living in New York and the hell of living in New York.
Now I'm crying.
Completely.
And when, truly, and when.
I want to be 28 in New York City
Honestly,
again.